The decade that gave us some of the most memorable music in history also witnessed heartbreaking losses that shocked fans worldwide. Behind the glittering success stories were brilliant artists whose potential was cut short by tragedy. These are the 10 most tragic stories of 1970s forgotten stars. Number 10. Terry Kath by Chicago. Terry Kath was Chicago's founding guitarist and the creative force behind their groundbreaking fusion of rock, jazz, and classical music. Jimi Hendrix once called him better than me, praise that speaks volumes about Kath's extraordinary talent. Born in Chicago in 1946, Kath grew up in a musical family and taught himself to play guitar. He co-founded the band that would become Chicago in the late 1960s, and his innovative guitar work defined their sound on classics like 25 or 6-4 and Make Me Smile. By January 1978, Chicago had split from their longtime manager and appointed a new one. The band was still successful, but internal tensions were mounting, and Terry was frustrated with the pressure to write commercial hits. Kath's love of alcohol and cocaine was impacting his talent and judgment. He had always been fascinated with firearms and regularly carried guns, which worried his friends and bandmates. On January 23, 1978, around 5 p.m., at the home of band roadie Don Johnson in Woodland Hills, California, Kath began playing with his guns after a party. He spun his unloaded .38 revolver on his finger, put it to his temple, and pulled the trigger. When Johnson expressed concern, Kath picked up a semi-automatic 9mm pistol and said, "Don't worry about it. Look, the clip is not even in it." His final words were, "What do you think I'm gonna do? Blow my brains out?" Unknown to Kath, there was a single bullet in the chamber. He accidentally released the round near his temple and died instantly. He was just 31 years old, 1 week shy of his 32nd birthday. Chicago continued without their founding member, but many agree the band's creative peak ended that tragic night. Number 9. Danny Whitten by Crazy Horse. I can tell by your eyes that... Danny Ray Whitten was born on May 8, 1943, in Columbus, Georgia, and became best known for his work with Neil Young's backing band Crazy Horse. Neil Young once said that Whitten was his musical soulmate, stating, "Every musician has one guy on the planet that he can play with better than anyone else. You only get one guy." My guy was Danny Whitten. Whitten joined Billy Talbot and Ralph Molina in the doo-wop group Danny and the Memories, before they evolved into the Rockets. When Neil Young left Buffalo Springfield in 1968, he began jamming with the Rockets and was so impressed that he formed Crazy Horse with Whitten, Talbot, and Molina. Whitten's contributions to Young's 1969 album, Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere, were substantial. He sang the opening track, Cinnamon Girl, alongside Young and shared lead guitar duties on Down by the River and Cowgirl in the Sand. These songs would later influence the entire grunge movement. Whitten began using heroin to cope with severe rheumatoid arthritis pain, becoming increasingly reliant on the drug. His condition deteriorated to the point where he was dismissed from Crazy Horse by his own bandmates in 1972. In April 1972, Young called Whitten to join his new backing band, the Stray Gators, for the Harvest Tour. But Whitten showed up to rehearsals in terrible condition. He couldn't remember parts and struggled to keep time. On November 18, 1972, Young fired him again, giving Whitten $50 and a plane ticket back to Los Angeles. That same night, Whitten died from ingesting a combination of diazepam and alcohol. He was trying to get off heroin using these substances, but the combination proved fatal. He was 29 years old. Young channeled his grief into The Needle and the Damage Done, one of his most powerful anti-drug songs. Whitten also wrote I Don't Want to Talk About It, which became a massive hit for Rod Stewart. Number 8. Pete Ham by Badfinger. Peter William Ham was born on April 27, 1947, in Swansea, Wales, and became the lead vocalist and primary songwriter for Badfinger. The band, originally called the Ivies, became the first non-Beatles act signed to Apple Records in 1968. Paul McCartney wrote "Come and Get It" specifically for the newly renamed Badfinger, and it became a worldwide top 10 hit.
If you want it, here it is, come and get it.
Ham initially protested using a non-original song, but was convinced of its promotional value. Ham's songwriting talents soon proved themselves with hits like "No Matter What," "Day After Day," and "Baby Blue." His greatest success came with "Without You," co-written with bandmate Tom Evans. When Harry Nilsson covered it in 1972, it became a worldwide #1 hit and has since been covered by hundreds of artists. In 1970, Badfinger made a devastating decision by signing with American manager Stan Polly. Polly quickly gained control over the band's finances and systematically stole their money. When Apple Records folded in 1973, Badfinger signed with Warner Brothers, but Polly disappeared with their advance money. By early 1975, the band's legal situation was dire. Their March salary checks bounced, and April checks never arrived. Ham had recently bought a £30,000 house in Surrey, and his girlfriend was expecting their first child. On the night of April 23, 1975, Ham received a phone call from America, telling him all their money had disappeared. The next morning, April 24, 1975, he hanged himself in his garage studio. He was 27 years old. His suicide note read, "Anne, I love you. Blair, I love you. I will not be allowed to love and trust everybody. This is better, Pete. P.S. Stan Polly is a soulless bastard. I will take him with me. His daughter Patera was born 1 month after his death." Number 7. Tom Evans by Badfinger. Tom Evans was Pete Ham's songwriting partner and co-writer of Without You. The tragedy of Badfinger didn't end with Ham's death. It would claim Evans 8 years later. After Ham's suicide in 1975, friends noticed a marked change in Evans. He became withdrawn and prone to depression, struggling with the loss of his closest friend and creative partner. The surviving members of Badfinger attempted to rebuild throughout the late 1970s, but legal battles over Apple Records royalties continued. The success of Without You should have made Evans wealthy, but the money remained tied up in lawsuits for years. By 1983, tensions among surviving band members had reached a breaking point. There were disputes over who deserved what share of the Without You royalties, with former manager Collins and other members wanting a share of Evans' songwriter income. On November 18, 1983, exactly 11 years after Danny Whitten's death, Evans had an extensive and heated telephone argument with bandmate Joey Molland about past Badfinger income and royalties. Following this argument, on the morning of November 19, 1983, Evans hanged himself in the garden at his home in Richmond, England. He was 36 years old. The cruel irony was that just a few years later, there would be a massive revival of interest in Badfinger's music. But it came too late for both Ham and Evans. Number 6. Phil Ochs. Phil Ochs was one of the most important protest singers of the 1960s, but his struggles continued into the 1970s, leading to his tragic end in 1976. Born in Texas in 1940, Ochs became a central figure in New York's Greenwich Village folk scene, alongside Bob Dylan and Joan Baez. His anti-war songs like "I Ain't Marching Anymore" became anthems of the protest movement.
So many others, but I ain't marching anymore.
As the 1970s progressed, Ochs found himself increasingly out of step with changing musical tastes. The folk protest movement had given way to rock and disco, and record companies lost interest in his political songs. The end of the Vietnam War in 1975 left Phil feeling purposeless. He had built his career opposing the war, and without that cause, he struggled to find meaning in his music and life.
It seems that there are no more songs.
Phil's mental health deteriorated rapidly in the mid-1970s. He began drinking heavily and became increasingly paranoid and erratic. Friends noticed disturbing changes. He would sometimes claim to be a different person entirely. On April 9, 1976, Phil Ochs hanged himself at his sister's home in Queens, New York. He was 35 years old. His suicide note simply read, "I am not Phil Ochs."
It seems that there are no more songs.
Number 5. Gary Thain by Uriah Heep. Gary Thain was the bass player for British heavy metal pioneers Uriah Heep during their most successful period in the early to mid-1970s. His powerful bass lines were crucial to albums like Demons and Wizards and The Magician's Birthday. Born in New Zealand in 1948, Thain moved to England and joined Uriah Heep in 1972, replacing original bassist Paul Newton. His bass work on songs like Easy Livin' and The Wizard helped define the band's theatrical heavy metal sound. The constant touring and rock lifestyle led Thain to develop a serious heroin addiction that affected his relationships with bandmates and his ability to perform reliably. In September 1975, during a concert in Dallas, Thain received a severe electric shock from his bass guitar that left him unconscious and hospitalized. Instead of serving as a wake-up call, the incident led to increased drug use as he tried to cope with trauma and ongoing health problems. Uriah Heep dismissed Thain from the band in early 1975 due to his unreliability. Without the structure of being in a successful band, his life spiraled out of control. On March 8, 1976, Gary Thain was found dead in his London apartment from a heroin overdose. He was 27 years old, another member of rock's tragic 27 Club. Number 4. Tim Buckley. Tim Buckley was one of the most innovative musicians of the late 1960s and 1970s, pushing the boundaries between folk, rock, jazz, and avant-garde music. His 5-octave vocal range was legendary among musicians.
Oh, let me sing a song for you.
Born in Washington, D.C. in 1947, Buckley moved to Los Angeles and became part of the folk rock scene. His experimental albums like Lorca and Star Sailor were critical masterpieces, but commercial failures. Buckley's artistic vision alienated mainstream audiences, and he struggled financially throughout the early 1970s. His experimental approach made him virtually unknown to casual music fans despite critical acclaim.
Must we drift with the pool forever?
Personal problems compounded his professional struggles. He had a complicated relationship with his young son, Jeff Buckley, having largely abandoned family responsibilities to pursue his music. In 1974, Buckley attempted a commercial comeback with Look at the Fool, returning to more accessible song structures. When this album also failed commercially, he became increasingly discouraged. On June 29, 1975, at a party in Santa Monica, Tim consumed heroin without realizing its purity. Having little experience with hard drugs, the overdose proved fatal. He was found dead the next morning at age 28.
But sometimes I wonder, do you?
Number 3. Robbie McIntosh by Average White Band. Robbie McIntosh was the drummer for the Average White Band, a Scottish funk group that achieved massive success in the mid-1970s with their infectious blend of soul, R&B, and disco. The Average White Band formed in Dundee, Scotland in 1972, and their tight, funky sound quickly gained attention. When they moved to Los Angeles in 1974, they became one of the few white bands to successfully play funk music that was authentically soulful, rather than merely imitative. Their 1974 album, AWB, spawned the massive hit Pick Up the Pieces, an instrumental track that showcased Robbie McIntosh's precise pocket drumming. The song reached #1 on the US charts and established the Average White Band as major players in the mid-70s funk scene. Robbie's drumming was the foundation of the band's sound. His groove was impeccable, and his ability to lay down a steady pocket while adding subtle flourishes made him one of the most respected drummers in funk music. Musicians like Chaka Khan and Ben E. King sought out the Average White Band specifically because of their rhythm section. On September 23, 1974, the Average White Band was celebrating their American success at a party in Hollywood. Someone at the party offered what they said was cocaine to several band members, including Robbie McIntosh and bassist Alan Gorey. What they didn't know was that the white powder was actually heroin, and it was much purer than anything they might have encountered before. Both Robbie and Alan collapsed almost immediately after taking the drug. Alan survived after being rushed to the hospital, but Robbie McIntosh died that night. He was just 24 years old. The tragedy devastated the Average White Band. They had just achieved their dream of American success, and now their drummer and friend was dead because of someone's cruel mistake or negligence. The band considered breaking up, but eventually decided to continue in Robbie's memory. They recruited Steve Ferrone as their new drummer, and he helped them continue their success through the late 70s. But nothing could replace Robbie McIntosh's unique feel and the chemistry he had brought to the band. His death cast a shadow over all their subsequent achievements. Number 2. Keith Relf by Renaissance. Keith Relf had already achieved fame as the lead singer of the Yardbirds, the influential British blues rock band that launched the careers of Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, and Jimmy Page. But his death in 1976 was as shocking as it was preventable. The Yardbirds disbanded in 1968, and Keith formed a new group called Renaissance with fellow ex-Yardbird Jim McCarty. This new band explored folk rock and progressive rock sounds, moving away from the blues that had made the Yardbirds famous. Renaissance evolved throughout the early 70s, eventually becoming a predominantly classical-influenced progressive rock band, featuring the stunning vocals of Annie Haslam. Keith stepped back from lead vocals, but remained involved as a songwriter and occasional performer.
Little girl, just like you, I'm a man.
By 1976, Keith was also working with another band called Armageddon, which played a heavier, more metal-influenced sound. He was also pursuing his interest in archaeology and had largely stepped away from the music industry. On May 14, 1976, Keith Relf was in the basement of his home in Richmond, London, playing an electric guitar. The guitar was poorly grounded, and Keith received a fatal electric shock. He was found dead by his family later that day. He was 33 years old. Keith's death was particularly tragic because it was so easily preventable. A properly grounded electrical system would have saved his life. Instead, rock music lost one of its pioneering vocalists and a man who had been present at the birth of heavy metal music.
Took my love away.
The Yardbirds' influence on rock music cannot be overstated. They were the bridge between blues and hard rock, and Keith Relf's harmonica playing and vocals were crucial to their sound. His death was a reminder of how dangerous the technical aspects of rock music could be when proper safety precautions weren't taken. Number 1. Paul Kossoff by Heep.
Every single day.
Paul Kossoff was the guitar hero of the British rock band Free, whose blues-influenced sound helped define hard rock in the early 1970s. His tragic struggle with drug addiction ultimately claimed his life at the peak of his career. Born in London in 1950, Paul formed Free in 1968 when he was just 18 years old. The band's lineup included vocalist Paul Rodgers, bassist Andy Fraser, and drummer Simon Kirke. Their chemistry was immediate, and their sound was raw, powerful, and emotionally honest. Free's breakthrough came with their 1970 album, Fire and Water, which included their biggest hit, All Right Now. Paul Kossoff's guitar work on the song, from the memorable opening riff to his soaring solo, became a blueprint for hard rock guitar playing. The song reached number 2 in the UK and established Free as one of Britain's premier rock bands. Paul's guitar style was deeply influenced by the blues, but he brought his own emotional intensity to every note. His solos weren't just technically impressive, they were deeply felt expressions that connected with listeners on a gut level. Songs like Wishing Well and Fire and Water showcased his ability to make the guitar sing with pain and passion.
You turn me on, but quick as a flash.
But success came with a price. The pressures of touring and recording, combined with the rock and roll lifestyle, led Paul to experiment with drugs. What started as recreational use quickly became a serious addiction that affected his playing and his health. By 1971, Free was falling apart due to internal tensions and Paul's increasing unreliability. The band broke up, reformed, and broke up again several times between 1971 and 1973. Paul's drug use was a constant source of friction and worry for his bandmates. In 1973, Paul formed a new band called Backstreet Crawler, but his addiction continued to worsen. He was frequently unable to perform, and when he did play, his once brilliant guitar work was often compromised by his drug use. On March 19, 1976, Paul Kossoff was on a flight from Los Angeles to New York when he suffered a heart attack caused by his drug use. He was just 25 years old. His death robbed rock music of one of its most soulful and influential guitarists. Paul Kossoff's influence can be heard in countless hard rock and metal guitarists who followed. His ability to combine technical skill with raw emotion set a standard that many have tried to match, but few have equaled. These tragic stories remind us that behind every great song was a human being struggling with very real problems. The 1970s may have produced incredible music, but for these talented artists, success couldn't protect them from personal demons, predatory managers, or the dangers of fame. Each musician left behind a lasting legacy. Terry Kath's innovative guitar work continues inspiring musicians. Danny Whitten's influence echoes through Neil Young's catalog. Pete Ham and Tom Evans created Without You, one of music's most enduring ballads. Their music lives on, even though their lives were cut tragically short. What makes these stories particularly heartbreaking is how many deaths were preventable. Better addiction treatment, honest management, improved safety standards, and stronger mental health support could have saved most of these lives. These weren't just statistics. They were real people with extraordinary talent who deserved so much more than they received. By remembering their stories and celebrating their music, we honor their memory and hopefully learn from their tragedies. If you enjoyed learning about these forgotten stars, please like this video and subscribe for more stories about the musicians who shaped our world.